I don't know if we'll need actors, in the future. I think you'll still have, like, I could see you having like AI generated actors where it's a team of people. I think you see this, and I think it's happening, more and more in like Asia, where there's some of these like AI generated like stars and celebrities, and they actually like, it's still important to tie the story in, and you still have to be really good to build that character. But now it wouldn't be limited to people that look a certain way on screen and have the right connections. Like, you could have everybody's like building actors that are unique and have a story that you connect to and deliver things in a certain way. And like, you'll just kind of like license out these characters.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Curiosity Podcast, where we go deep on a wide variety of technical topics with the smartest leaders in the world. I'm Immad and Raj, the co-founder and CEO of Mercury. Also, I'm an active investor and have invested in more than 300 companies.
I'm Raj Suri. I'm co-founder of Lyft and Presto Automation.
And Dave Rogenmoser, who's the CEO and co-founder of Jasper. Dave, you want to do a very short intro on like what Jasper does?
Yeah. Jasper is a company we started about 2 years ago. We help marketing teams write high quality, great content and do it in about half the time with the help of AI. So been riding this generative AI wave and being one of the first companies to help really productize that and take it to market to end users.
Just curious, like what got you excited about this field, and what gets you motivated to do what you do?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of just perfect time, perfect place, perfect team. It was about 2.5 years ago. We were spinning down our company Proof that Immad graciously invested in back before we really knew what it was 5 years ago. Liked the team a lot, but had laid off some people just because we were trying to get profitable. We're kind of saying, hey, we don't really want to keep pursuing this, vision. It was a marketing tool that helped increase conversion rates on websites, and we were trying to get into the personalization space. And for a variety of reasons, we decided this wasn't gonna work out. And then I'd seen GPT-3. I'd seen all the like Twitter threads and just fun old demos, and thought, oh, that would be really great for writing marketing content. I was teaching this course on how to do Facebook ads for B2B SaaS companies. And one of the lessons, I think it was like week 3, was how to write a great ad and how to write great ad copy. And I'd been doing Facebook ads for years and years. And, I taught this framework of how I wrote our ads. And it was always challenging to get the people in this course. There's maybe like 12 other founders in there, or CMOs. And it was always challenging to get them to really follow, my formula and do it as well as me. And so I saw this, and my first thought was, I could just build a little tool that could like help them write their ads for this course. And like, maybe it's more than that someday, but like at the very least, like that would be pretty cool. And I could like sell more courses. And so we just built this really quick MVP to solve that problem. And it was super sketchy. You couldn't do hardly anything. I mean, there's no settings. You couldn't even cancel. There wasn't a cancellation button, which was like our way to minimize churn and keep it at 0. There's nowhere to go. And yeah, launched it. And, I did some like calls with some of our coaching clients, like as it was kind of just an MVP. They couldn't even like use it. It was just a screen share. And people were just like cussing on the phone and just saying like, oh my gosh, how do I get this today? And for like all the years I'd ever been in business with my co-founders, the previous 7 years, like I'd never gotten that reaction. And so I knew pretty quickly, like, this is different than anything I've ever done. And kind of quickly learned that this had the potential to be a really great company.
Dave, I'm an investor in like more than 300 companies now, and your story, both pulling off a pivot and also your kind of growth charts after you did it. I'm not going to give away any stats. I don't know what's public, but it was just astronomical. It was like a crazy story to see. I remember every month you'd send your investor update, and I'd be like, "You think it's going to happen next month too?" And you'd be like, "Do you remember that?" Right?
I just dreaded sending those monthly investor updates, and they frequently got less. They weren't monthly because it was just like nothing is even happening here, and then I just think it got to the point. There was probably like a 6-month window between like the last proof one. I kind of go dark for 6 months. We build Jasper, and then it's the funniest like follow-up one. It's like, hey, we're still alive, and it shows this like flat chart for 3 years, and then just this like massive uptick on the right. So
that explosive growth is like very hard to come by. Like, Raj is a co-founder of Lyft, so maybe he's seen it before. But like, do you think it was something about the AI and the fact that it was like being utilized that like got people really excited about sharing it with people? Or was it just that it was solving this pain point that was like really painful to people?
yeah, it was just solving a real pain point in a dramatically better and magical way. And so, it worked so well and it worked so well in a way that was like so surprising that like everyone just told everyone about it.
Seeing such rapid growth, was there like a moment where you flicked a switch and like you just saw like an explosion of usage? Was there like that? We've all been there as part of a startup that we've worked at, or was it just kind of like building over?
It was very quick. It was, the first 2 weeks, I don't know. We had this goal to reach $50,000 MRR like by like midsummer. It's like 6 months in, we'd reach like $50,000 MRR. And I think we reached it like 2 weeks in. And then, we're like, wow, this is really great. I'm like, oh man, let's try to reach 200K, by then. And then, a few weeks later, we like hit 200K MRR. And then we did this webinar about 3 months in, like at the end of March. We were just selling one plan. So it's like a $29 a month plan. Everybody was on this $29 a month plan. There was really no expansion or anything, which hadn't built any of that in. And so we built out this pro plan and hosted this webinar. And I've done a bunch of webinars, in the past over the years, like, probably over 100. And usually we'd have like, you have 20 people show up, or you have, 60 people or 3 people. And this one, we had like 2,500 registrants, and then the room was totally full with like 1,000 people. And I pitched this pro plan, and I think we added like $400,000 of MRR in like 3 days.
Wow. What was the cost of the pro plan?
It was 90. I think it was like $109 a month, I think. And so I had like all this crazy expansion, and just like people were going nuts. And, that was a pretty magical moment when it was just like, holy cow, this thing is like left the station and it's working. And, it just felt really good after, I feel like, 7 or 8 years of grinding away to finally hit something that, you feel like you were working towards the whole time.
You mentioned, I think earlier at some point that, you're not an AI researcher, but, you like to understand how these different technologies can be applied to different use cases. Where do you think this technology is going to go in terms of like, what use cases do you think are going to become more and more prevalent that maybe people aren't even thinking about today? I think what you're doing now is kind of obvious. It's like this is obviously the way of the future. But what use cases do you think are not obvious?
Yeah, I think obviously you see a lot of the generation of text and images, and then you'll see, video become better and better, and it'll kind of continue, to generate great stuff. I think what large language models are really great at is just understanding. And so, it's kind of like what we've always wanted Siri to do, or Alexa, and like I can just like talk to it in like regular language and get it to do stuff. And I think that's the big like next leap, is that these models will start being able to do more things for us outside of just generate text and images. You could connect multiple apps together. You could say, hey, I'll go start my car, and it could actually go and do that. And you could say, hey, write me, 10 Facebook ads and like upload them to Facebook. And it'll be able to do that. And so I just think like we're going to get to this place where they're just doing more things, in the digital world. I mean, at some point it'd be the physical world too, that aren't confined to like a very like narrow use case or a very narrow tool, and that actually like connect different tools together. And it'll be across the different tools. So I still think like we're super early, and people are just kind of learning like what to do with it. I think most of the conversations are still more on the research side, and There's kind of just now coming online a new wave of entrepreneurs that are saying, hey, how do we build really great products and tools with this? And that's going to be incredible.
Do you think one of the, your use case is very fault resistant? Like you both, it's like copy for marketing, which doesn't matter if it's a little incorrect, and you have a human normally like look at it afterwards. I worry that a lot of other use cases are not so fault tolerant. Actually, the one that you just said, like switch on my car, is not so bad. But like if you were thinking about, like, people are like, oh, why don't we apply this to like doctors, right? Like that's the kind of thing where like if you make a mistake, someone could die. So do you think we'll get to a position where like we can apply this to use cases that aren't so fault tolerant, or is it like mostly focused on like these kind of fault tolerant?
No, I think so. And I mean, even, humans are humans, even doctors and all that. So even there's some level of, okay, like we're comfortable with some risk here, and doctors make mistakes and there's liability insurance. It's a little bit worse if it's a computer makes a mistake, and that's what, you die of, as opposed to, a PhD doctor, or an MD. But I think like the hallucination is a big problem, and that, these large language models output things that aren't true, and they do it so authoritatively and convincingly, and you could read a whole paper and it kind of lulls you to sleep because everything you read is true, and then it kind of slips in, one or two things that aren't true, but they look pretty true. And so, I think I've seen research, and we've even experimented some things that decrease hallucinations and definitely make them more accurate. I think at some point we might need to rethink kind of how we train the models, and actually like the process of even getting to where we are now in order to like really solve that. But I think there's likely going to be, a human in the loop for the really high risk use cases for a long, long time. But I think it's solvable.
Yeah, and one thing you talked about was like digital to physical interfaces. I mean, those are going to become more lucrative to develop now that you have a really powerful digital intelligence that could drive physical use cases. Do you see a lot more investment going into that as well? I mean, this is something that I work with a lot, and Presto is digital to physical, thinking about how digital can impact physical.
I have not seen it that much, and that's somewhat surprising to me. I think there's definitely a lack of that, and I assume that you've seen this, if that's kind of what you're focusing on. It's like the physical world is like so hard to change, and it's not really keeping up with technology. And it's like, my computer's like wholly different every single day, and everything is like coming alive. And it's like, I go down and my toaster's the same and my microwave's the same. Everything's like normal life outside of your computer. And so, so I'm really excited, but I have not seen a lot of investment kind of flowing in, or like even a lot of really cool companies coming out that make that leap using generative AI to go impact physical products.
Yeah, I think it's going to happen. It's there's a lot of companies and investment out of MIT in particular, around these types of problems. But you're right that it's not enough. There's disproportionate. I mean, that's one of the downsides of like the startup economy, is that like startups like to work on things that are cheap, and working in the physical world is not cheap. It's very expensive to invest in the physical world, and many companies fail. And so, but at some point that becomes the bottleneck, and you have to undo that bottleneck. It was a hardware innovation with the smartphone that got us to where we were, right? And being able to deliver software to everyone's, pockets.
I mean, VCs keep getting burnt when they touch the physical world, right?
Yeah, like is it just not lucrative enough to really? It's just really put money there.
It's hard to pull it off. I mean, if you look at the top tech companies, both Amazon and Apple are very heavy in the physical world. So it's definitely lucrative if you can pull it off.
It's like the VCs can't do it, but the big companies can, right? Like it takes an Apple, to figure it out for the smartphones. It took an Amazon to figure it out for cloud, right? And the VCs can't stomach it. There's just too much investment. You get a Magic Leap type company, right? Yep. Where it's very difficult for them to sustain that type of loss over many, many years, and they need to keep generating hype. It's not easy.
Is the way for startups to do it more to keep bringing down the cost of interacting with the physical world? And do you see like breakthroughs?
I mean, I think one of the interesting things in AI is like maybe, a lot of like the innovations that like I've invested in and are interesting are in robotics. So like, does AI reduce the cost of robotics? Because a lot of robotics, like you're doing like kind of, very point-based machine learning, or I guess we all call it AI now, solutions. Whereas like maybe with generative AI, you could have like a generic AI layer that you kind of just train to like move the robot a little bit, and you don't have to build that understanding from scratch, which maybe helps.
Yeah, I've seen talk and research just around like the ability to do all these simulations, virtually now. You used to have to actually build out all the prototypes and test it all. And now you can do, hundreds of thousands of simulations and iterations, before you even go to the physical world, and can really prove out a lot of concepts there, which would certainly lower the cost in a big way.
One thing I've wondered about is, okay, whether it's GPT or one of the other kind of APIs, like if the LLM space in general is like very accessible, so you can build a startup on it very easily, does that mean that like you don't really have a moat? Like there'll be like 1,000 Jaspers or 1,000 other applications, and it'll be very hard to build like a very kind of sustainable large company as a application layer, or do you think like that's not the case?
Well, I think there's something there. I wouldn't be spending my life building on that. But, there's certainly like some risk of that. And it's funny, we can have one foot in the AI research world and like talk to a lot of folks there all the time. And then I've kind of got one foot. Our customers don't care about that. They're just trying to solve this problem. And so I've always got to simplify and spend a lot of time just with customers and, people that aren't AI experts. And the AI experts always think that the model is a commodity. And they're like, yeah, this is commodity. There's nothing here. It's going to be, all go to zero here very soon. And you're going to see, like they all talk like that. And they're like, the hard part is the product and distribution and go to market and the UI. Like that's where the value is. And then I talk to the other people that are, aren't the experts, and they are like, oh yeah, the products, that's easy. That's a commodity. The value is in the model and the data and all of that. And these are really smart people on both sides. And so I think you end up thinking the thing that you're not as good at or not an expert in is where all the value is. But it's really funny because both feel that very dogmatically. I think that that there's lots of moats. I think it's very rare for a B2B software company to have really strong moats. It doesn't have the network effects like a Facebook or Lyft or things like that. And so obviously, like we've got to innovate. We've got to build differentiation and moats. Where we can find them. But I don't think there's anything that we're going to do that is going to be long-term, defensible, and I could just kind of rest on my laurels and like not keep executing. You see that, and you said there might be 1,000 Jaspers. Like there's probably 1,000 Jaspers that launched today that we've got to go beat. And now, fortunately, like again, we're really good at a lot of this, and it's there's more to a company than just kind of building a UI. We've got great distribution. We've got a great community. We've got really great insights from talking to customers and obsessing over customers, every single day, where some people are not doing that. And so I think there's like a lot to building a company that is, hard to do. And various people will do that to different degrees. But I don't think that, maybe to juxtapose, I don't think that like the models, are also like these defensible places that once you build a large language model, it can just last for a long time. You're seeing them come out so quickly and copy each other. And you're just seeing that the innovation moves so fast. It's like, I think what we talk about a lot is, again, find defensibility where we can. But more than that, we're trying to build a team and an engine to continue to innovate regularly so that we can always, have speed to market and speed to innovation there and kind of keep that lead.
Yeah, I think the dirty secret amongst SaaS companies, especially amongst technical founders, that we don't really talk about that much because we get enamored with the technology, is that like a lot of the moat ends up being like brand, and or like your customer network or something like that, or just like your referenceability among customers and word of mouth. And people don't talk about that, especially amongst technical folks. It's kind of anathema in some ways, but I talked to a senior person at a very large SaaS company recently, and I asked them what their moat was, because it was like a very simple product. It was literally like a a type of CRM type product, and they're like, our mode is we get our customers together once a month so they can, with new prospects, and people love to come to these dinners or events, and that's what gets us into more customers, and it's a simple thing, it's a simple execution thing that had nothing to do with the technology. So that was pretty instructive as well. This is like billions of dollars in revenue for a company.
That's amazing. Yeah. People don't like to talk about that. And again, like when I think about like my week, like most of the really hard things that I'm doing are around building a team, building an organization, like building great partnerships. It's like all these things that are not only product, related, endeavors. Like these are really hard. They're really stretching me. And like I'm gifted in those things, and they're still incredibly hard. And so it's like, I think with any company or founding team, like there's going to be things that are really, really hard to do that are necessary for building a great company. And yeah, you've kind of got to do it all, but you certainly have to nail the product and build differentiation where you can.
I think one thing that's good about Jasper and makes it more sustainable is this kind of business use case. I think it's much harder if you're building a consumer company, where I do struggle with most of the generative AI consumer companies that feel like a little fatty. Yeah. And it's hard to see how they charge these, like some of these profile pic ones were like charging like these insane values, which I get, like it's kind of fun to do it, but like it just doesn't seem like a very sustainable business on the consumer side.
I know you'd have to really build a machine that can just keep cranking out winners, all the time, and get it blows up, and you get the number one in the app store, and you make a bunch of money, and then before you know it, all the apps do what you do 24 hours later, and you've got to kind of keep doing that. Yeah, we definitely love selling to businesses. We have seen, and we have a lot of consumers and like prosumers and single seat users that use Jasper, and that's definitely like a harder place to compete. And a harder, group of people to continually please over and over when, the switching costs are lower and they don't mind kind of going somewhere else. But we do see, we get into teams and we get into, larger companies, and there's a lot less of the noise and a lot more of just you building value for your customers. And it's just an easier segment, I think, to go and penetrate.
What's the longest form content or like most complex type of content you guys help enable today?
Our number one use case is blog posts. And that could, that probably looks like there's probably a lot of different examples of different kinds of blog posts, and people call, white papers, blog posts, things like that. But, several thousand words, maybe 4,000 to 6,000 words would be kind of the high end window of the kind of content people are creating. People do use Jasper to write books, and one of our, like, probably 2 weeks after we launched Jasper, we had no like long form stuff. We had like this like Facebook ad tool. Some guy went and wrote a whole book in a weekend, kind of using this Facebook ad tool, and he kind of figured out how to hack it and get it to like say what he wanted. And it must have been just an absolutely miserable experience, kind of using this like one sentence at a time generator. And wrote this entire book, and that really blew my mind. And we quickly saw that people were hacking our product to write really long form stuff and finding good results with it. And so we kind of made this shift from more of the short form ad copy, landing page copy type product to really long form product. And people seem to really like that.
I mean, this question might seem a little basic to you, but I don't think people actually understand it. Like, what does it take to go from, like, I can go to ChatGPT and say, write me a blog post about X, versus I can go to Jasper and say, write me a blog post about X. What makes it different to go to Jasper and do it versus like ChatGPT directly?
Yeah. So when we started out, they had an API and no one was like really building on it. And I even remember I was in this Slack group kind of early days with like everybody else that had access to GPT-3, and everyone was doing very trivial things with it. And I'm sitting there thinking, guys, we're sitting on a gold mine here. Like this is incredibly powerful. And everyone is using it to like translate the Declaration of Independence into Elvish and just like these like weird, like trivial things, and all thought that was super cool. And they're all complaining about latency and, all these things. I was just like, forget all that. businesses want this, and they're willing to work through the kinks to go and do that. And so like early days, there was a lot of like prompt engineering, and it was just figuring out how do you prompt this, behind the scenes. How do you give it like really high quality examples? And like a lot of the work was there, plus there's like different kind of settings and tweaking that you can do, to the API to improve the results, but it was like, I would say straightforward, not necessarily, easy. You had to have like really like strong knowledge of the use case in order to get better and better results. But it was that as like the models have gotten better, like the prompting has like diminished. The value of like the prompting itself has diminished because they're just so much better out of the box, and they might not need examples to really do well. And so like we're kind of seeing, I think, that layer diminish. But what you do have opportunity to do is fine tune, is to take, as we have more and more data, we've just seen more and more great examples of great blog posts, of ad copy that people like, of paragraphs that are high quality. And at least for us, like outputs that our users prefer. And so now we've been able to take that and, we use a variety of different models. We use, OpenAI is a great partner, certainly use like a ton of their stuff. And like the majority of our outputs, kind of come from them. But then we also have, other partners and other models that we're tweaking that we're able to go and fine tune these models like for Jasper specific use cases. I think this is where there's a lot of value for companies to build is, OpenAI and ChatGPT is going to be, inherently more generalized, and it's going to work for a broad number of use cases for a broad number of, people doing all sorts of stuff. But like people come to Jasper for like a job to do, and like Jasper is where people go to work. And so the question about ChatGPT, I mean, Jasper, has Jasper Chat, so if you kind of wanted to use, a chat-like interface to do that, Jasper, you can certainly do the same things in Jasper as you could in ChatGPT, where we would add different tools, or we would add different tools around, blog post creation. So we also have templates that make it easier and more structured to go and create blog post headlines and outlines and things like that. We've got workflow tools where you could generate, each step of the blog post kind of piece by piece, and you create a intro topic, and then it creates an outline, and then it creates paragraphs for each outline, and then it cleans them up, and you can click a button and it'll create art and images for each one of the blog posts, like sections cool in there. And so like I think there's a lot of value in like what is the job to be done of the user, and how do we just work backwards from there to pull together like a variety of tools in a very like opinionated way around that use case. And I think we found that when many users have more structure, they do better. When you're kind of, it's very unstructured and they look at it, it's an unfamiliar, interface, they don't really know kind of how to get from point A to point B. But many users do like that structure. And so we build tooling that, helps you do that faster.
Do you think personalization is important? Like, I assume you fine tune on like a generic thing, right? You can't say like, say things in the voice of Immad very easily. I mean, I guess I have enough tweets out there that maybe people can, but like in general, it's like personalizing it is still pretty tricky, right?
Yeah, it is tricky, but we're making some really great progress there, I think, as an industry and as Jasper. It still doesn't really make sense to fine tune a model per customer. Like in the back end of Jasper, I mean, it's not like there's just like
you mean
one
like
model.
It technically doesn't make sense?
Yes, it technically doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Cost, time, all of that. Like we could do it, and for a super big contract, we'd be like, all right, we're going to go fine tune the whole app and every model, for that use case there. But by and large,
like how much would it cost?
It wouldn't cost that much, like in compute and training. It would be more collecting all of the data, our team kind of, synthesizing that, cleaning that, making sure we have enough of it, making sure we have the right quality of data, like from a customer, we'd go grab all your tweets, we'd go grab, whatever we kind of could, but like, there's occasions like you don't actually have the right data to go and like fine tune off of for like some use cases. Mm-hmm. So I think it's more like operationally and just like the complexity of now kind of having 90 new separate models for this one account that would make it like very complex to like the operationalize in the back end there. But I think we'll get there. And what we are doing more. We just launched Jasper brand voice, and we're like betaing that with some different companies where you can upload information about your company, about your style, about your tone, about your brand voice, about your product descriptions and all of that. And then as you're writing, we can go retrieve that. And again, it's not a fine-tuned model, but it is retrieving the right information at the right time about your company that does provide a very unique experience. And it functionally feels like very personalized to you, and it is personalized to you, but I think it's in a different way than like most people think that it would happen, where they would think it would come from like custom models.
Yeah, we were saying earlier about people creating like books from your system. It was pretty fascinating. I mean, do you think like 3 to 5 years from now, like basically every newspaper, every book is made in a very different way, where like the news is made with just a couple prompts. Here's some updates, or maybe it comes from like a Reuters feed or something like that, and it gets adapted to the New York Times by AI, and then a New York Times editor just reviews it, and it goes into the paper. I mean, do you think that's the way like books and all like articles will be published in the not too distant future?
Yeah, I don't even think it's years out. I think it's probably way closer than that. And I think maybe the natural question is like, well, what happens to creativity if kind of that's how writing happens or books happen? What we have found with our customers is that the like spectrum of creativity doesn't go away. And it's not like, oh, everyone gets smushed into, if you use Jasper, like, you're all kind of the same amount of creative and all that. But like our power users are like coming up with really remarkable, clever, creative ideas and ways to use this, and ways to tie in great stories with image generation through Jasper art and like all these things. And then like the less creative people like come up with just far worse stuff. And so, I don't think people will be sitting around looking at blank pages, typing out every sentence from scratch. And I don't think it'll take years and years to write, a book. I think you could write a great book very quickly, but you'd still have to understand understand people, understand like storytelling, understand like how to combine these tools in order to like create a really compelling experience for the reader, for the user. And the bar will be raised, right? Like there'll be more books that kind of pass the bar, but I still think you're going to see like exceptional books, exceptional movies, exceptional media sites that have a unique insight into a group of people and figure out how to apply this in a really unique way. Like, I don't think that's going away at all, but I do think a lot of this, like just write, I think people will move from writers to editors in a very big way.
I actually think that like most of the current stage of AI doesn't solve the creativity part. It actually removes the drudgery part. Like, I don't know if you know this, Raj, but Fatma used to write for the Next Web, and she had to write like 5 articles a day. So like it was like a machine. So there was very little actual like creativity. It was like much more like assembling facts together as quickly as possible. And actually, I think it will enable people in those kind of roles to actually be creative, because if you can like have the facts assembled really quickly, then you actually spend most of your time on the creativity side rather than like just writing down the facts and assembling everything.
And it can eliminate like language barriers, like there's people in the US coming from like all these different countries. My wife, for example, is, native Chinese, and she's creative, but she can't write well in English, as well as us. So, she can write that in Chinese and can have great translation to English, or, good interpretation due to that.
Yeah. There's just me so many more people that can participate in the creative process in a variety of mediums. One of our like maybe most interesting customers, his name is Jim. He, was like an academic and copywriter, and he, outside of a grocery store, it was about 5 years ago, he got attacked and suffered a really traumatic head injury. And that injury turned into aphasia, where he had a really hard time recalling words and communicating. And he went from this, very smart guy that could communicate his thoughts and write and all of these things, to a very smart guy that now could not do that and couldn't participate, couldn't write, the things he was writing before. And so when AI, kind of came onto the scene, he was like an early adopter of it. And for him, it really unlocked like his mind and his ability to communicate again in a very big way. And he's become probably like our most creative user. He creates really amazing things that always blow our minds. He's very creative with his prompting. He actually applied to design school. He's not a designer, but he applied to design school as their first AI designer, which again sounds kind of crazy. You'd think that like, oh, like design schools are going to hate this. Like this school's leaning into it. And they're like, hey, this is just like a new medium. And he's like wonderfully creative. And that was, so I think you asked like, are we more or less creative as a culture, with this? It's like, I would argue more, because now you've got people like him that could never even participate in that process that are pushing the bounds forward and like creating really unique things out there. So I think you're going to see just a ton of that, where people that could have been adding and creative and creating a lot of value there, like just couldn't. And now they can. And that's really powerful.
I've felt a little bit that like LLMs are the most interesting thing, and the generative kind of images and even the video things are like a little bit more, I don't know, like they're cool, but I find it hard to come up with like actual good applications for them that are not just like kind of like, oh, this was cool. And I feel like the LLMs maybe have like a, I guess, ability to apply to a lot of use cases that it's very broad. Like it's just basically talking to something and getting knowledge. Like, do you agree with that? Or do you think there is actually like kind of the art or maybe video side of it could actually have like these kind of broad applications?
I think they will have very broad applications. They're maybe a little bit behind. And I think, with images, what they have that makes them so viral and powerful is that you can generate something, you instantly see it, and it's like, wow, that just came out of a sentence. And when people generate a paragraph, it's like kind of hard. Like you got to sit down and like read it, like to understand, was this good? Is this just junk? Is it just nothing? And so it's like an instant like wow factor with images, and something that like makes them go viral. I think the challenge is editing them, making them actually exactly what you want. Where if I generate a paragraph, it's not quite what I want, I can just go delete a few words, copy and paste this thing to other. But like, how do you like fix, this image is something I like, but it's got 7 fingers. And like, I don't know, I have to go into Photoshop and like be an expert there. So it's like, it's hard to like get stuff into the final state that you want it in with images. But like, that's just a short-term bug. And I think it very quickly, I don't know, just kind of look around anywhere, any book cover, any images for ad copy, anything you post on social media, any billboard, like all of these things will just be created at least first pass by generative models. And so I think it'll be equally big. I don't know what kind of like the total addressable market is for kind of one versus the other, and like which one has like more application. But I think we're going to be very quickly seeing real practical use cases with the image and video side.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think there's the applications for images and video seem tremendous to me. I mean, marketing via video could be really much cheaper to do. Right now, it's expensive. That's why we don't see a lot of it. But when it's cheaper, it's going to become a lot more common. And of course, there's a huge, creator industry, right? And TikTok and these types of things. People creating video. I mean, that's becoming a massive industry. That's becoming people's careers. And so, like, that's going to become largely AI driven, I think, going forward. So, yeah, I'm very excited about images and videos. Even TV. I mean, like TV and movies to some degree, animation. That whole industry is going to be AI powered, for sure. It's of course, there's going to be still a lot of humans there, but it's I'm very excited for that evolution.
Have you guys seen the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once?
Oh yeah, great movie.
I mean, perhaps like the most creative movie, in a while, and visually very interesting.
I haven't seen it. Can you describe what's special about it?
I've only seen like half of it, but it's just like, I don't know, just visually, it's just like very unique and creative. And it's like not like any movie that you'd kind of like normally see.
It's hard to describe. You got to see it.
It's just kind of hard to describe. I don't know. It's just kind of like a visual, like smorgasbord of, storytelling and, visual effects. And I was talking with the CEO of Runway ML, which is like a generative AI, like video editing platform. And he said he was like looking at, I think maybe the credits of the movie, and it was like a 7-person like visual team. And he's like, that's really strange. Like that should be a massive team. Like, I wonder like what they did. Like, how did they pull this off? Are they using contractors? Have they just been put up there or whatever? So he like got a hold of them and he was like, hey, like, how'd you create this insane movie with just such a small team? And actually they said, oh, we used Runway for, you know, a lot of this. And I think that's what you're going to see. Like people that like that team would have before had to go get way more funding and get the powers that be sign off on the movie and all that stuff to create this like really creative film. And now we get to see it, you know, just because a few people wanted to make it. And it turns out to be like really great. So I'm really excited about that.
That's funny that he didn't even know his own software was used for it.
Oh, I know. And I was like, dude, that should just be your like, that's your headline on your website. It's everything, everywhere, all at once. And
all at once.
You know, really powerful.
This is somewhat unrelated, but somewhat related. Is like, do you think actors get like that whole industry of acting, and do you think they get somewhat replaced by AI? Because I mean, that's one. It's hard to get a human in the loop in that, and the technology is good enough that you should be able to.
I don't know if we'll need actors, you know, in the future. I think you'll still have, like, I could see you having like AI generated actors where it's a team of people. I think you see this, and you know, I think it's happening, you know, more in like Asia, where there's some of these like AI generated like stars and celebrities, and they actually like, it's still important to tie the story in, and you still have to be really good to build that character. But now it wouldn't be limited to people that look a certain way on screen and have the right connections. Like you could have everybody's like building actors that are unique and have a story that you connect to and deliver things in a certain way. And like, you'll just kind of like license out these characters.
I mean, what if people really, really care about seeing like that specific actor and the bond with them? Like maybe it will just be that like a given actor can now do 10x more movies.
Yeah.
Like
okay. Yeah. So I think
like
in the
lend
shorter
out your-
term, yes, I think we'll obviously we've got our batch of actors now that are real people, and you're like, you know, they'll continue to have like pull, and yeah, I think they'll probably start licensing out, their face, and you know, it's just way cheaper.
voice.
You could either have Tom Hanks for 20 million, or you could have his likeness for like 800,000, and you know, you just put it on the body double or something like that. Like I think that'll happen in the short term. But yeah, I just don't know if you're going to need. I don't know if you're going to need human actors, you know, in the future, but you still will need people that can create stories and create, you know, I guess that the persona that is the actor.
You need directors. You'll need story. You know, you'll need writers. You'll need editors for sure, right? You'll need, you know, to some degree, designers, but their job is going to be, you know, editing what the AI comes up with. It's going to be a different, you know, job altogether. But yeah, I think actors is one of those things that could be, you know, significantly disrupted. And people will, you know, to Immad's point, people are going to start bonding with the AI characters soon enough, and then they won't care that much.
You know, take like Leonardo DiCaprio. Like he knows something about his skill that like nobody, like that people can't replicate. They don't know. Like again, I'm sure he's like hyper intelligent and emotionally aware about like what he's doing. And again, I think there'll still be people like that, and there's still a value there. But like maybe in the future, he can create and run 7 different actors, you know, taking that unique insight that he has, and they're going to be the 7, you know, best actors in the world because he knows something that we don't. And even if you had all the same tooling, you know, you couldn't quite capture what he's doing there.
Yeah. I mean, actors, the best actors participate really intensively in the creative process of building the character, right? And so they're not just like being a face on the screen. They're actually you know, doing more than that. So yeah, someone like Leonardo DiCaprio probably is a good example of that, who's like very involved in the creative process. And there's probably a number of those folks out there. Whereas there's some people who are just faces on a screen. You know, so those people will get disrupted.
I think one interesting downside to this is I think there's a world where the stories that we like share as a culture, like we lose those and they get fragmented, and everyone's watching their own unique movie, you know? And so you'll be able to just generate a movie that really fits your taste and your style and is, you know, aligns with themes that you believe about the world and, you know, is super entertaining for you, but nobody else has watched that movie in the world and you can't talk about it. You can't, you know, be challenged in, you know, some of these ideas that you have. You can't, like you lose that shared experience.
To some extent, that kind of happened with streaming already, right?
Yep.
Like it used to be the case that everyone would watch this episode and everyone would talk about it the day after. Now it's just like the whole season's out on Netflix, and like sometimes people talk about seasons as a whole, but I do feel like the collective, like, we're waiting for this episode, we just watched it together, and it was like a big
we could talk about it the next day, and what'd you think? And obviously there's just kind of like the like entertainment factor, but I think like there's value in like a culture like having like, we all have Saving Private Ryan as like a movie that you're like, man, it teaches us something that we value as a culture, and we can kind of share that, and we kind of like build something on that. And like, what if like all of that goes away and like we're not reading the same books and they're all just, again, kind of maybe more and more like echo chamber. I think there's like a risk to that, and maybe we end up not caring, or maybe that is so powerful that we kind of see it start to like come back together instead of being fragmented, because people actually prefer that.
Yeah, I feel like we go back and forth to some degree, because like I think as a society, we do crave that. We do crave a common connection and common media to some degree. And, that's why things like Squid Games or like White Lotus or things like that, they do still emerge even in today's age of streaming, because people do want to have a shared experience, and they talk about things with their friends, and they want other people to see the same thing that they've seen. It happens probably a lot more, rarely now than it did before, but it still happens. And, it's also some of the criticism behind social media. I mean, you can customize your Twitter feed to be only things that you look at, right? Versus things that everyone's looking at. So there is that aspect that's already happening today, and that's always a risk. But I think the natural human urge to be part of a collective, that's counteracts that as well. So there's going to be this back and forth that continues. And the question is how far we'll get into this world where it's just like everything is personalized.
Yep. And I think that kind of goes into like a bigger conversation, just as like a culture. Like, I think we need to be intentional about, what we want these tools to do in our lives. Like, I don't think there's any kind of like stopping it or putting the cat back in the bag, but like, like we've got to decide, like, do we care about artists' rights and getting them rewarded for, providing training data? And again, it's not clear. I think it's kind of up to the culture to decide, like, what do we kind of want to do and what do we want to value there? Do we kind of value the like original, artistic expression, or do we kind of value high quality training data and great models and all of that? And so I don't know, I think there's like a lot of the conversations and decisions that need to happen here over the next, 5-10 years of just like what role do we want this to play in our lives? And, there's no stopping it, but I think there is shaping it.
Isn't there a problem that the government can kind of screw it up, right? Like if they're like, I mean, even if you take LLMs, if like someone's like, oh, actually, like if you ever use this training data, like you gotta pay X of your revenue for it, and like it's hard to implement. It doesn't make that. I would feel like most ways that a government would end up implementing it would probably be like worse off than where we are right now.
Yeah. I mean, the pace at which this is moving is just so different than the pace at which governments evolve and move. And, I'm not saying there's not like some place for like appropriate involvement there, but yeah, I look more to just like society and culture and just kind of us collectively deciding, hey, what do we think is important here? And how are we going to kind of reward behavior that's in line with how we want to be as a culture?
Yeah, I mean, just looking at like recent history, right, with a few things. So, obviously the music industry and, the emergence of Napster and all these things like highly disrupted a very lucrative business for music producers, right? And there was no government to step in and try to take care of the artists there, right? They had to find a new business model. They were significantly disrupted. I think the same thing with Uber and Lyft, right? Like coming in and like disrupting the taxi industry. There was no government to step in. The taxi industry just got disrupted. And I think more, that's quite likely to happen here, I think, where like, there's going to be a set of people who are going to have to change the way they work because of this technology. And, we talked about actors, we talked, there's other, I don't know, copywriters or things like that, that whose job are going to change dramatically because of this. And it's just going to happen. I mean, that's just the history of technology. And you're right, the society at some point is going to have to figure this out. But I don't really think society is going to have a vote. I think it's going to be, a small group of, relatively small group of people who are going to who are going to try to figure things out for themselves, and they'll raise a fuss about it, but ultimately they're gonna have to change.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think, like you said, this has always happened. I mean, we have far less farmers than we've ever had, in previous points in history. And I think people kind of think, well, does that mean everyone's just going to be homeless? It's like, you don't see like all the old farmers like homeless now and poor. Like they just like developed other skills
Right.
and like did new things. And
Hey,
so
did you guys see this post by Mark Andreessen about why AI can't possibly take all your jobs?
I saw it, but didn't read it.
His thesis, which I thought was really amusing, and I think it's probably true, is I don't know if you've seen this graph where it says like basically anything touched by technology and innovation, like it has had massive deflation, whether it's like
Yes.
TVs or consumer goods or whatever, and then anything touched by like government and to some extent like people and services costs, like hospital, education,
Yep.
health, education, and there's a third one that was always quoted. Has got like massively inflated costs. And his point was that like AI is going to have a difficulty going after those kind of regulatory captured industries. And basically the cost of everything else is going to go near zero, and all the jobs will be in these kind of industries with regulatory capture and all the GDP basically.
Interesting.
Do you think that's true though? I mean, don't you think like, for example, I mean, healthcare and education, for example, seem like ripe for disruption by AI, like especially like, first round of diagnosis can easily be done by an AI, probably better than a primary care doctor.
They seem ripe for disruption, but do you not think that regulatory capture will stop the disruption? Like are we really going to let an AI without a doctor like give people a diagnosis?
Yeah, like will that even be legal? Will insurance, it's like, yeah, I could see that getting so tangled up where like it's pretty good and it could be really good for like on par for a long time before you're even able to like really use that.
Yeah, maybe in other countries where there's just not enough doctors, like there's actually like a pretty big kind of global doctor shortage. So maybe this will have more of an impact in places where like they're just lacking these basic services.
Yeah, I mean, I can see governments getting a little bit upset about it, but I'll tell you, there's a lot of flexibility right now with like things like telehealth. It's very easy to get like a doctor to like give you anything, like a prescription or whatever, and have insurance pay for it. Like there's some certifications and stuff that are captured in the regulatory scheme, but I can see a lot of that stuff. Getting AI maybe illegitimately at first, using AI illegitimately, but then it slowly starts to become more obvious that it's AI driven. I mean, telehealth and AI are bosom buddies, right? They're gonna be good friends. Everyone using telehealth, both the doctors on the other side as well as the consumers themselves, will start just using AI naturally. I think as part of to help themselves out. I mean, right now, when you have a problem, you probably Google search, right? So, like, you're like, oh, I have this symptom. What do I do? I mean, that's going to all go to an AI. Like, and the governments can't stop that. Like, that's just people are going to go to a website and do that. But and then the doctors are going to start using AI because they don't want to remember what they read in a textbook like 10 years ago. So they're going to start using AI as well. So it's going to be hard to stop, I think.
Yeah, when I looked at that chart, it also appeared like a lot of the prices that had inflated, it was, I think it was like college tuition, childcare, even like food and beverage. It's like stuff that's hard to globalize, like you can't outsource your childcare to somebody, overseas. And, some of it's like almost like this like physical world stuff that, I think it'd be interesting to figure out if we can kind of reduce the cost of labor and augment more of the physical world. I'm not saying we need like robot childcare yet. I've got 3 little boys and sometimes that would be nice, but it's kind of like these are things that like naturally have to be people driven and can't be, offshored. Maybe we'll see technology improve those things.
I don't know, Dave, if you've seen like GPT-4. I've heard from a few people who've kind of tried it out and they seem like, think it's a massive improvement. What do you see as like the short term, like next kind of 6 to 12 months improvements that are happening in AI? As far as like you probably have a view on it that other people don't. What do you think's happening and what will it change?
Yeah, we test we're working with pretty much any big model provider and kind of getting early-ish access to, the models and seeing what's out there. I think there was and I don't fully know what all, OpenAI calls GPT-4. I mean, it's not like a single thing. It's like it's like on a spectrum. And so we're testing a lot of them. I think 3.5 was a pretty big leap over GPT-3. I think 4 is, kind of continuing on that spectrum. And so, I don't know, the models I've played around with, which I'm not just being coy. I don't actually know kind of, is this what they're calling GPT-4, are better, but I think it's like overhyped on Twitter and, thinking that, oh, it's just you click one button and you get, a 4,000 page novel, just like that. It's not that, but I think you're going to see better zero shot prompting where it can do a wider range of things out of the box. You'll see these models doing better with some more like abstract thinking, like poetry, rhyming, connecting the dots between two things, like, write me a poem, in the style of, Beyonce about this topic that, it's just like kind of connecting these like random things. I think that'll like do better at. I think you're going to see context windows expand dramatically, where right now most of the models are limited to like 2,000 to 4,000 tokens. And so you just can't fit a lot of content in there, either kind of in the input or the output, which like really limits the kind of work that you can do or the kind of like context that it can hold. And so I think you're going to see like those windows expand dramatically to where maybe you have a 50,000, token context window, or 100,000 or 1,000,000, which just opens up a lot more possibilities, around kind of how you
what would be the most interesting possibility from like a huge context window?
Well, obviously like one, you could, click a button and generate 4,000 words, in one. Now, would it be good or not? Who knows? There'd probably be like a lot of drift. Yeah. But I think the big thing is you could store more like company or personal context in that. And so if I say, hey, write a blog post about, Mercury or, about whatever, the importance of banking, I could send in 5 previous blog posts as examples in that one prompt. And it would be able to feed off of those and like imitate those. Where like right now you have to fine tune. Yeah, you'd have to fine tune for that right now, which is just like so much more work. And so like as these context windows.
Do you think like I always find one thing that like makes the AIs like less, I don't know, less human is they don't seem to like keep their own context. Like they don't have a life, obviously, but they also just like don't remember their previous things. If you were like, if you like, whereas a human's always like, okay, this is my story. Like they don't have a story. I wonder if they can have like more of a story if they keep like a continuous context.
Even you see that some with, I know there's some examples of, when Bing Chat came out, it kind of appeared like after 5 interactions back and forth, the like original context and maybe even like the original prompting like fell out of the context window. And it would start to kind of go off the rails because like it's a context problem. It just can't fit all of it. And so you've got to be selective and opinionated as a company. And again, like users don't understand this. And so it's really challenging to figure out how to include the appropriate context, which in a way that does what the people want it to do without them really even having any idea how to do that. And it's not always clear cut that just send in the last bits of what they were writing about. Sometimes, for writing a blog post, maybe you always want to send in the title and the description. And even if it's a really long blog post, the beginning of the blog post might not fit in the context window, and you've got to cut that off, but you still want to keep the title and the description in order to kind of keep it on track there. So there's just a lot of engineering that has to happen around this that would be nice to not have to do.
Speaking of this idea of like, the AI is becoming a little bit more human. I know there's this whole like, fear factor driven by sci-fi about sentient AI, but do you think the AIs should become, like these language models should become a little bit more human in terms of like how they, like dealing with things like empathy or dealing with different types of soft touch, like even if it helps their humor to be a little bit more relevant and on point. Do you think that's one part of the evolution of these language models is to make them more human deliberately, even though, they might have some, and you could maybe cap the downside by some protection so that it doesn't act doesn't have all the negative attributes of a human.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I certainly think that could make them, maybe a little bit more palatable or adoptable. I mean, they do a really great job at, imitating those things. And, some might say, well, humans are kind of imitating empathy, a lot of times too. And, I think for us, like I always come back to like, what's the job to be done? What's the ideal output or model or set of models to accomplish that? And so like for marketing, empathy matters and being human matters. And, like that's a really powerful way to write copy and to write blog posts and write stories. And so like in that regard, yeah, we've got to help our models be more human and more empathetic and maybe more casual. But I think other use cases may not need that at all, and that would actually detract by making it, more empathetic or more human-like.
Do you worry about kind of AGI or AI alignment, or do you think like that's overblown?
I wouldn't say I worry about it. I can see I can understand kind of both sides and kind of see a world where that is not a net positive for people. I think it's compelling. I think I'm an optimist. And so, I'm kind of just like, let's go create and build and, let's be thoughtful about these things as they come up. But I don't really worry about it. None of the kind of futures where we get destroyed by, turned into paper clips, by the paperclip making machine. Again, I could see a world where that could happen, but it seems like lower probability to me. But it's also extreme downside. So maybe even if it's incredibly low probability, it needs to be taken very, very seriously. And I can see that for sure too. What do you think?
I think actually like the level of AI we have is really interesting and there's tons of applications from it, but I don't think it's anywhere near AGI and human level intelligence. Like I just don't think we understand it well enough. Like I think we're far away from it. So that's my first blocker. I think my second blocker is I just don't think. I think the more intelligent something is, the more empathetic it is, and yeah, I think I mean that's what's happened with humanity to most of the extent, right? Like I think humans were like, yeah, real assholes like 1,000 years ago. Like we had like rampant slavery and there's just a lot of bad things, and humans have improved. I think the smarter the societies have got, so there's no reason to think that a really smart AI would not also head in that direction.
Yeah, there's this like window, let's say it gets smarter and more powerful really fast. There's like a pretty small window in which it would like care to destroy us. But before it gets too smart and powerful where it's like, it doesn't even bother me.
A lot of these things that like people debate in like kind of technology and scientific circles are really actually like religious debates to some extent. I grew up in like a religious household, and one of the things that my parents could not understand is like how someone non-religious can still be moral, right? Like it would like, they were like, oh, if they don't have God to like guide their morality, like obviously they're all evil, right? Like that was like the thing, but like in reality, actually, people can be very moral and like make good ethical decisions without this like kind of forcing them to.
Yep.
Yeah, I think there's also this point about like the desire to like live and the desire to actually even destroy other entities so that you can live is very biological. It's actually a defining characteristic of life, of all biological life, is that all life
but
wants
all
to
of
live.
These LLMs are being trained on humans, right? So like wouldn't they have human tendencies?
I don't know. I mean, I think they will. They'll talk about human tendencies, but I don't know if they'll have an innate human like. I don't think an LLM is going to become sentient. I think we're talking about AGI. That's a different kettle of fish. So is it going to be? Is an AGI going to want to survive? Is it going to have that deep side? I mean, it could be programmed, I guess, to do that, and probably you could program an AI to be destructive, right? Like that. A hostile country, could maybe do that, right? Deliberately. Maybe that's the thing we should care more about. Is like if someone's going to do it deliberately, as a way to like hurt another country.
Dave, I think one thing that I always try to learn about this stuff. There's like the AI field and applications of AI is changing so fast. Like, where do you kind of go to, make sure you're on top of it? What sources have you found like the most kind of informative or communities you're in?
I mean, certainly Twitter is kind of where I'll see, breaking stuff and different demos and interesting things there. I'll interact some with like the research community and just kind of see like what's kind of out there, further out, a little bit more nebulous, a little bit, not practical today. And for that, I'm usually just like texting, a couple different friends and kind of seeing what, they're seeing there. I think it is important to have like a foundation. Again, I'm not a AI researcher, but I've taken a few courses and I've watched some YouTube videos just on kind of like understanding like the core concepts and like what's even kind of happening under the hood here. Like I think that's really helpful, even if you're not going to be an AI expert. But yeah, honestly, Twitter is probably where I kind of see the most interesting and like up to date things. By the time you write a book about it, it's like not even relevant anymore, so it's got to be a pretty like low pretty quick to stay on top of things.
Dave, was there anything else you wanted to cover today? Any other topics or something that you wanted to chat about that you were interested in, or any questions you have for us?
A lot of people ask me about kind of how to build products with this and what's made Jasper work when others haven't worked as well or whatever. And I think there's still so much opportunity today, even as it gets so crowded and competitive, for people that are willing to start with the customer and work backwards. And instead of starting with the technology and like going and like working towards a customer there. And obviously like the technology sparks it, so it's going to kind of start there. But I don't see a lot of people like talking to enough customers and like developing a point of view or getting a unique insight. And in a world where kind of like, a lot of it is becoming a commodity, like it's IP, like what you gather from talking to 30 customers is like your own IP. And what you build out of that is like a unique insight that you have on the world and you have on a specific segment. And so, people will ask, well, what could I build? And, for me, the way I would approach if I was starting over new is I would pick a segment, pick a customer base. Let's say it's, doctors, let's say it's lawyers. And I would just start to like really talk to them and I would start to really understand their workflows and what do they use, after, to do this thing. And then what do you use before that? What do you use after that? And just like going really deep there. And then turning around and being like, okay, cool. Like I understand the pain points. I understand what they're saying that is so painful and takes up so much time and is so tedious. Like, is there something in generative AI that can solve this extremely well, or something not in generative AI? Though, again, I would probably recommend people are building generative AI.
You were not just like talking to marketers, you were a marketer, right? Like you'd written a course about it. So like you had this like super duper deep insight.
Yes. In my case, I had spent 7 years fully engaged in that community. And so that's the other shortcut too. It's like if you just are the customer,
spend 7 years on it.
It's like you can do, yeah. But if you could solve your own problem, obviously that's where like so many great companies have like come from. But like this is gonna be so prolific across so many different industries that I think it just starts with like talking to the customer and like working backwards from there. And I think there's real differentiation and power in that. It's not as sexy as like starting with the model and working out, but it's far more powerful. So that's always my encouragement to people is like go talk to customers for a while and then go and look at the tech. And I think you'll come out with some really interesting solutions that it's very likely other people are not thinking about because they haven't gone and done the legwork there.
Yeah, and you're more likely to be able to commercialize them because you're solving someone's actual problem.
Yeah. So that's just what we always talk to our team about is just, hey, like we want to be customer obsessed. We're always starting with the customer, working our way out. As widespread as we all think all of this stuff is and GPT-3 and all that, like most people in the world don't know, don't care, will never care what a GPT-4 is. And they've got pain points in their day that they're looking to have somebody solve in a delightful, easy, elegant way. And if you can go and do that, they will love you for a long, long time. They'll pay for it. And that's a repeatable model that a company can take to keep building great products.
What a great point to end this great podcast. Really appreciate you taking this time, Dave.
Yeah,
super
thanks,
interesting.
guys.
This was
Yeah, good
fantastic.
chat.